Okay, so part 3, moving on from getting married in the church. So it's January 12th, 2020. That is when our world was starting to get rocked. So at this point, my husband had promised to have a vasectomy reversal, that we were going to try to have a child to see if we could make it right, open our hearts fully in a Catholic way. But it wasn't something that was scheduled, done, set in stone, or anything at that point. And things were about to get crazy. So my husband does healthcare IT. He was actually being trained on some of this pandemic management software stuff back in January. So around the time that we had our marriage validated in the church, he was just kind of starting to mentally gear up for the reality that a pandemic was coming. I was still completely out of the loop. Like, he tried to warn me, and I was just like, whatever. It's in China. It can't be that big a deal. It'll be fine. It's no different than the bird flu or H1N1, whatever other ones we had in the past. By March, though, I think we were all pretty clear on what, that this was going to impact our lives. So he had got a job offer up here in Baltimore. So we, in the midst of this pandemic, started making plans to sell our house, move up here. And one of the things we did when we were selling our house was we made prayers to St. Joseph, who is the patron saint of home sales. And also his feast day was our home number, 319. So we were praying to St. Joseph, and my husband said that if we sold the house for enough money to cover the reversal surgery, he would schedule it for as soon as he was able to take time off work at his new job. Well, our house sold in 7 hours at the price that we had set, purposely high enough to be able to do that. 7 hours. It was wild. So he scheduled it. And then he scheduled it for a little further out, thinking, oh, well, pandemic stuff will hopefully be winding down. But not how that happened. As you may recall, as we got to the end of the summer of 2020, when we thought things were settling down, suddenly they weren't anymore. So we canceled because of fears of traveling in the midst of another resurgence of the COVID rates. It seemed like a risky time to try to undergo a surgery that was elective, so it was canceled. He rescheduled for later, into early 2021. But by that point, we were encouraged to not do it by our priest, because the pandemic had wreaked havoc on our mental health. And the priest actually gave me some advice that still to this day does not sit quite right with me. And the reason it doesn't is because it reflects a mentality that I've heard a lot being used to justify abortion. And that is, it would be immoral to bring a child into this situation. So he should not have reversed the surgery. And the situation in question was that through the midst of the pandemic, things were hard. There was more fighting. Our family's mental health suffered. My husband's role in managing the pandemic was very hands-on. And that's a lot of psychological stress, similar to perhaps a soldier on the front lines, except, this soldier was drafted. I don't think he didn't join healthcare IT because he liked roller coaster rides. He just kind of got called up and answered the call and did what he had to do. But it was hard. It was psychologically stressful, and there's a lot of stress on our relationship. Plus, being quarantined together for a year is hard, I think, on a lot of marriages. And so things were rough. And this was something that was a repeated issue for me, very much for me. Like something that was like ripping apart my soul. Which is why he had, even though we were having problems, rescheduled it. But we do take what our priests say seriously. And so when your priest says something like that, we just like, well, I guess we can't. I'm still not so sure that it was the right choice for us to listen at that point, though, simply because things got worse for us in our marriage. And the truth is that this particular issue has been such a rotten point. It is one of the main pillars, an openness to life. It is one of the main pillars for a valid Catholic marriage. And this choice to have the surgery before we got married was a active choice against that. And even though the redemption is offered, you don't have to have the surgery. You're given reconciliation and mercy anyway. Reconciliation with God doesn't erase the lived consequences of the choices that we make. It doesn't mean that we're going to stop suffering the emotional or physical fallout of any of the errors that we make. So the pain was still real for me. I was still really not able to make peace with it. And I wasn't okay with that decision being handed down for us, that we weren't allowed to pursue that as a married couple that is financially stable. And we ended up having to take some time apart, which has been good. And made us realize how important this is to us, this marriage, marriage in general, that we do very much value, having made this commitment to each other, and we do want a valid sacramental Catholic marriage. We wouldn't have done all of the things to make sure our marriage was recognized in the church and that we got all the sacraments if that wasn't important to us. And it's been a hard summer, for us. It's been a hard year. The pandemic has been super hard for us. Some of you out there may have noticed how little patience I seem to have with the conspiracy theorists when it comes to this pandemic stuff, simply because our family has been through the ringer because of trying to manage this. Just being the support person for someone on the front lines of this pandemic is hard. Just being the child of such a person is hard. But this time apart was also hard, and made us realize how much we want this. And I never doubted that. I knew in my heart that I am called to the vocation of being a wife. The idea that I had to take space and separate for us to like catch a breather and better communicate and figure things out, like, was heart-wrenching to me. I was so aimless. I just felt like I didn't know what to do with myself, because I know in my heart this is the vocation I'm called to. It's just with the way that we were trying to live it, for me, it felt like it was a vocation that was only being allowed to be half lived. And that was ripping me apart and making me feel like I couldn't even continue doing some of the things that I knew made me who I was, like being a birth doula. I couldn't stomach it well anymore. And that broke my heart too, to feel like I had become so damaged that I couldn't even do what I loved. And so part of one of the things we had to really address was this openness to life. The Catholic Church has a high calling for married couples in their openness to life. And it's one that I think is beautiful. I no longer really struggle with that. I've suffered from trying to control it, and I'm not interested anymore. I have suffered enough. Half a decade is plenty of time to suffer for my own desire to control things. For my husband, though, this openness is newer. But we are officially scheduled for 30 days from now. Thereabouts. We're going to be going to Utah to see a specialist who he actually is like trained doctors of the Mayo Clinic on their reversal techniques, but he offers affordable reversals as like a ministry. He's stationed his clinic in Utah so that it can be more affordable. So yeah, we're gonna fly out there and hope and pray that it works. He's gonna get sacrament of the sick before we go, or sacrament of healing before the surgery, and the big thing isn't a specific result in terms of whether or not a child is conceived, as much as the openness is what matters at this point. To be open to life is to completely give yourself to your spouse. As a woman, you're giving your body entirely to your husband. Honestly, it's one of the most powerful acts of self-sacrifice and submission for you to give your body to your spouse in that way, to open yourself up to carry their child. From a man's perspective, it is a big sacrifice too, in terms of providership, of the legal responsibilities, of the fact that for 18 years you will be legally responsible for this person and financially responsible. It feels like a big risk for some men to enter into that, and especially when marriages are so dissolvable. It's a big act of trust and love to willingly open yourself up like that to someone. And so at this point, it's not just about the end result of a baby. It's not like that's the focus. The main focus is that it's going to be about making things right in our marriage, and before God, and in our conscience, and being able to really like come to this place together has been beautiful for me. Very long sought after thing. Just kind of come to a point where it was kind of a pain inside I thought I was just going to forever have to live with. That if I was going to be in this marriage, that it was going to be my burden to bear for the rest of my life. And I wasn't bearing it very gracefully, but I was trying. And I'm very much looking forward to not having to do that anymore. That the yoke will be lifted in that way, whether or not the surgery is a success, whether or not we actually conceive a child. I'm obviously hoping and praying. I pray every time I go to church. I've been praying in adoration for years now. I don't know if it'll happen, but I know that opening the door is going to be so healing for our souls. And I'm very much looking forward to it. After almost 6 years of being together, we're going to get to really try to be together the way that our faith urges us to. And I hope it goes well. And any of you people out there, you pray, keep us in your prayers, not just for a specific outcome, but just the ongoing conversion of heart and a joyful, grateful spirit, no matter what happens.